fact, just last week, we celebrated the anniversary of the receiving of the Torah on Mount Sinai for the 3,338th time. 3,338 years ago, we received the Torah on Mount Sinai, and the Torah makes it important to point out to us that the Jewish people were camped around Mount Sinai, ki ish echad b'lev echad, as one man with one heart. Because when we stand united, we are able to draw upon ourselves the highest and mightiest blessings from above. Now, that is far easier said than done. It's not that easy to get along with your fellow human beings, especially not with the ones that you know. It's easy to respect a human being or a Jew that you've never met before. But when you know about the Shmendrik next door, the Nudnik who lives down the street, the Shlemazel that takes your seat always or your parking spot, that one, it's a little more difficult to get along with. Yet we know that when we exhibit unconditional love to others, then God does the same to us. When we give to the undeserving, then God gives us when we don't deserve as well. It's worth it. What that means is that if you meet someone who asks you for money, and you think that they might be abusing it, or you think they might not deserve it, what this means is that you should probably give them something. Because by giving to the undeserving, you are drawing God's blessing upon yourself. Now, I'm not saying you should be enabling their addictions, that's probably not a good idea, but to be compassionate and less judgmental is certainly appropriate and called for. Which is why we're hosting this event here tonight. And a very special thank you to Mordechai Pintel for sponsoring tonight's event. We very much appreciate it. Thank you very much. Second year in a row, we're grateful for your support. Because tonight we have here the world's leading authority on autism. And I say that very, very carefully. Because there is not a single other... Look, let me put it this way. There are many professors in the world that have autism. But there's only one autistic professor in the world who is the professor of autism. And that is Professor Stephen Shore. He's a man who's been able to manage his challenges, to manage his struggles, and he really knows what he's talking about. When he's a professor of autism, he really understands this. This is not just academic. This is experiential. This is personal. And what he's going to talk about tonight is how we can be inclusive of other people. How we can be sure to be kind to them. I did not know, but Professor Shore told me that our lights here are actually triggering for autistic people. Because somehow they are like a strobe effect that's overly sensory for a person with autism, and I had no idea. So I just learned something. And I'm hoping that tonight we'll be able to learn the skills that we need in order to make for a more civilized society, for a world of more kindness, a world of more acceptance, a world of more understanding, a world that aspires towards unconditional love. Before we call up our guest speaker, our keynote to the stage here tonight, I'd like to call upon Dr. Michael Horowitz to make the introductory remarks. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Scott. Thank you. And welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight, and I think we're in for a real treat. So I don't want to add too much to what Rabbi said, but I want to share a little bit about Dr. Shore. He was diagnosed with atypical development and strong autistic tendencies and too sick for outpatient treatment. He was recommended for institutionalization, and he was non-speaking until 4. But with support of his parents, teachers, wife, and others, Stephen is now a full-time professor at Adelphi University. He's an adjunct at several other universities, focusing on aligning best practices in supporting autistic people and to help them lead fulfilling and productive lives. He recently received an Emmy for his contributions toward the PBS Kids animation Carl the Collector, to make sure that it actually represented, that Carl, who was autistic, represented autism in an appropriate way. He works with children, he talks about autism and the spectrum, and he is an internationally renowned educator, consultant, and author. His most recent book, College Students and Disabilities, combines personal stories along with research. And what we're going to hear from him tonight is he's going to describe how focusing what a person can do leads to a more inclusive society where everyone, regardless of ability, can belong. Dr. Shore? This is recording.
All right, well, there we go. It's a pleasure to be back. It's a pleasure to be in front of you to talk about how we can better include autistic individuals in the Jewish community. I know some of you here are not Jewish. Everybody's welcome. And what I'm going to talk about can be generalized to all faiths. And I believe the more that we can include people with differences, people with disabilities, people with difficulties in our faith communities, the better off we'll all be. And I don't want to speak for Hashem, I can't speak for Hashem, but I sense that's something that God would like us to do. So we're going to get a bit of an experience as to what it might be like to be autistic in a community setting. I'm going to talk about some strategies and personal experiences that we can put together to better include individuals with autism and with other differences. So let us begin. What's it like? I'm hoping you brought your glib. Mark, did you bring your glib?
No, what's a glib?
You didn't bring your glib. Marlene, did you bring it? No? Dr. Hurwitz, where are you?
I'm over here.
Oh, did you bring your glib?
No, I did not.
You did not bring your glib. What's a glib? I have no idea. You don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It's a made-up word. But the way you felt, what is the person up here talking about? Whoever it may be. Oh, I don't know. Everybody else probably knows what it is, but I don't know what it is. And that's something that's isolating. That's isolating to the person who's autistic, who has some sort of difference, the person who doesn't know. And this is a feeling that we need to eradicate. And a lot of it relates to what is known as hidden curriculum or unspoken rules. And so often, autistic individuals in Jewish community settings just like here. Now, those of us who are Jewish, we know we don't touch the Torah with our hands, especially the words. How do we know that? How does the person who has a difference, who does not pick up these cues the way that most people do, get to know that? Now, the good news is that we can learn these things. And another piece of good news is that we have strategies for teaching these things. Why aren't you standing for the Kaddish? We all stand. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabo, and so on. But perhaps the person who has a difference in perception of the environment doesn't know that. We may have to take the time to tell that person. And we may use words just like I'm using words now. But it also may be that we have to use pictures. We may have to demonstrate. We have to provide different ways of getting the information across to the individual. And likewise, whatever the house of worship is, there tends to be seats where particular people sit. And everybody knows that that person sits there, and nobody else does. How do people know? Direct instruction may be needed. And direct instruction is a term we use as educators when we specifically tell someone the directions. We got a nice kiddish over here. No matter how much you like the sushi, you cannot eat all the sushi. You have to leave some for the others. Something that most of us know already, but again, may require some direct instruction. So there was mention about winning an Emmy, which was quite interesting for this 80 episode series, animated series, whereas Michael mentioned, features an autistic character as the lead, the first time that it's happened in the United States, the first time for PBS. I was very surprised at winning this. I knew that some months ago the show had won an Emmy. I guess I didn't know much about how they worked, so I thought, okay, that's great. I worked on a show. It won an Emmy. I'm really proud about that. But what I learned is that Emmys go to individual people, well, like me. So it was quite a surprise when this thing showed up my house on Saturday. Well, we can't open mail during Chabad, so it had to wait. I had no idea what it was anyways. So when I finally did open it up on Saturday night, it was my wife who almost fell on the floor when she saw it. So what about the show? And what about, not inserting is not quite the right word, but involving faith in all we do as we worship and we celebrate Hashem, as we celebrate God. And here is an example. I think once you listen to it, once you see it, you'll understand what I'm talking about, those of us who are Jewish, and I'll explain it for everybody when we get after we watch this 13-second clip.
How about setting the record for the most Argyle sweater vests?
No, Dad. That record is held by Dr. Stephen Short. He has 613 vests and counting.
Wow.
Why 613? Anyways, when they were, as part of my involvement in the show, I had to review the scripts all the way through from the one paragraph idea all the way to the final cut like that. And when it got to me, they had a number of 786 or some other number. And so I said, well, no, I think we have an opportunity here. Could we change that number to 613? I don't think they understood why, but they did it, and well, there it is. And yes, I'm known for having sweater vests. When this character, when I first learned about this character, I thought they were talking about me. Because what I found, let's see if let's get him back.
How about setting the record for the most Argyle sweater vests?
No, Dad. That record is held by Dr. Stephen Short.
Well, anyways, there he is. You don't have a full body picture here, but you can get it by going to PBS Kids, Carl the Collector, and it will pop right up. And when they showed it to me, the promo reel, asking me if I wanted to be involved in this show as a consultant, what did I see? Well, I saw that he wore a sweater vest, and I'm known for wearing sweater vests. I also saw that he wore green cargo shorts, the exact green cargo shorts that I have 6 pairs of. Because if one pair is good, why bother with the decision of choosing between others? Let's just get multiples thereof. And that's a common thing that autistic people do, because it can be challenging for us to find clothing. that fits. And if that comes to religious clothing of various sorts, if you find something that works, buy multiple copies. So I won't tell you how many sweater vests I have. It's not quite up to 613 yet. And I do have a number of copies of this particular sweater vest. So here's Carl wearing a sweater vest, wearing the same shorts. He's interested in watches. And if you remember from when I was here last year, I was taking apart watches with a sharp knife at age 4 years of age. And getting it back together again, it still worked and there weren't any pieces left over. And he loves bicycles. Well, I like bicycles. So I asked the producer, so where'd you get all of these characteristics of this little fellow? Did you read my book? Did you see my website? He said no. And the way I believe his answer is that he must have seen me at a presentation. Maybe he read something. Maybe he watched a video that I did and saw this stuff, got buried into his subconscious, and now it came out again. And if he really had no connection to me, never saw me before producing or writing this series, well, then it shows the authenticity of his research. And that the writer really knew about autism. I suspect the writer also is autistic. I've met him a number of times, but that's another story. So this 80-episode animation series, here's the website. And by the way, this is being recorded so that you can watch it again later if you want, or share it. And similarly, this stuff is meant to be shared, so it's perfectly fine with me if you want to take pictures of any of these slides and use them for however it might be helpful. And Carl the Collector is an educational series that is used to teach about the challenges that autistic people and otherwise neurodivergent individuals can go through. So we have Carl, who's autistic. We have Sheldon, who serves as sort of a wingman, an explainer person. He's not neurodivergent, and he helps Carl with many things. Forrest is a squirrel, and he has ADHD with a huge H. And we also have a...
What's H?
H? Hyper.
Hyperactive?
Yeah, yes. And then there's Lotta, who is also an autistic character, shows up as a fox. And it's great to see that because autistic females are vastly underdiagnosed, unrecognized. And there's just enough of a difference in terms of how autism presents itself as a female and societal expectations of a female that make it difficult for a male-oriented medical world to diagnose autistic individuals. So if we have Devora over here who's quiet, doesn't say much, keeps to herself, what do we say? Whether she's a kid or an adult, she's shy and we don't think much about it. Talk about opposites. However, if we have Michael over here who acts the same way, well, we won't necessarily say he's autistic, but it's definitely noticed, especially in grade school. So that's an example of societal expectations distorting the gender differences or identification of females on the autism spectrum. And we have a couple of others, Carl's mother and father, Harold and Maud. So some of you remember, yeah, that's exactly where it comes from. That's exactly where it comes from. So just as a reminder, a quick reminder, as Michael said, I was struck with the regressive autism bomb at age 18 months, like about 30% of us, and I lost functional communication, had meltdowns, withdrew from the environment, and in brief became a very autistic little kid. There was so little known about autism, and it took my parents a whole year to find a place for diagnosis. Baruch Hashem, they persisted, They got the diagnosis at 2.5, and thankfully, they refuted the professionals' recommendations for institutionalization in favor of what we call an intensive home-based early intervention program. So that's what it was like then. Speech was starting to come back at age 4. By the time, and a whole lot of stuff happened, which I'll refer you to last year's video, which I believe is on the Chabad website. If it isn't, well, you can email me, and I know where it is on YouTube. I can find it and I can send it to you. So I encourage you to check that out if you want to find out what my life was like as an autistic person. And now as we fast forward, as Michael said, I'm a full-time professor at Adelphi University, many other universities, and travel the world. 59 countries so far that I've traveled to talk about autism. All right, how many here are good at math? All right, good. So let's do a little math.
All right, let's do it.
We've got some addition problems here.
Number 1.
And
That's too easy.
here are the answers.
Oh, come on.
So is answer number 1 right?
No, 1 is right, yes.
What about number 2?
Yes.
3?
Number 3 is not.
What?
It's actually 238.
Really?
Yes.
All right, we'll get back to that. What about number 4? 5.
Nope.
They are correct. And now you're wondering, what the heck am I talking about? We got a math expert over here. We probably have some silent math experts here wondering what is going on. And the student who, in this case, has a math disability is wondering what's going on. What is the teacher talking about? Well, now that you have that little piece of information, it makes a little more sense. And just as a quick review, in any base that you talk about, we're in base 10, probably because we have 10 fingers. We go from 0 all the way to 9. We never get to a symbol for 10 because we just recycle the 1 and the 0. And so base 6 is like that, except you stop at 5, you never get to 6. And so easy enough once I explain it. But what about the person who does not pick up the explanation, who didn't read it in the book, who was unable to read it in the book, who might have known if the teacher had explained it verbally because maybe they learned better by hearing rather than by reading. Or maybe they learned better by experiencing it and putting little rods and blocks together in order to symbolize mathematical problems. So that's why I put that there, because again, you got a little bit of a feeling as to what it's like on the other side of someone who's experiencing a challenge or a disability. So now we turn to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe had some amazing insights on autism that we're going to look at. So we've got a couple of very important insights here. 2 quick videos where he's talking with Cantor Joseph Malovany of the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. He has a child, he has an autistic child, and he asked for a blessing for his child, and let's see what the Rebbe has to say about that.
is in Engeland in een speciale institutie, in Londen, een Indische institutie. Nu hebben we een bedrijf kan Amerika. Op de dag van een psychiatrische
Ils ont appelé autistes, de chasse, donc Tiere geschaffen mit, mit Menschen geschaffen, mit Menschen, die Schafe gut behandeln und well. Man soll nicht verhungern mit Menschen, weil sie verhungern mit Menschen.
Interessant ist, ich habe irgendwann probiert mit dem Lernen sozusagen eine Woche und das ist schon gesagt.
אתה יודע.
Ja, gesagt. Ja, bekannt ist bei ihm, das weiß ich, also das ja bekannt ist.
Wird das solche Mediziner?
Nein.
Wie kann ich das erreichen?
Das
Das ist was anderes, Lernen der Lektion, dann meine Talentenwirtschaft mit Studien versuchen, wenn man vieles versuchen, dann haben wir das nicht so.
ist okay. Was mit dem Reform damit ist. Vergessen dann.
So amazing. Yes, clap for the Rebbe. And he knew, intuitively knew, that we need to look at the strengths. We need to look at the abilities. What can the child do? Oh, he's good with the prayers. He's good with the tzitzis. Put a charity box in his room. Us autistic people like to remind people about things. We've got our routines. One of them is dropping coins into a little box, a pushka, that we give to charity. And an autistic person can really grab onto that routine and remind others to do the same. So let's take a look at what happens sometime later when the cantor returns to the Rebbe.
Sie gerne mal vorstellen, Zoom, es wird gezoomt. Das ist ja hier so. Auch nicht vorstellen, durchgehen. Ja. Das ist ein bisschen besser. Das ist Autistik, das ist der Kopf, das zurücklegen, leider. Und der Eingestellte, der Pushke, was da ist die Hoffnung, der sagt mir, er versteckt, was wir gesagt haben. Geld, Kuh, lernt sich das etwas. Das ist in England.
Das in Messe.
Genau, das ist jüdische Messe.
Ganz gut ist schon, dass die Ahinze schicken. Das war Messe. Und besten so als erreicht, als wirklich verstehen. Und dort allein in der Push. Das ist ja schon.
Du meinst Euro.
Und das ist alles so.
So his advice was helpful, focusing on the strengths, focusing on the abilities. Every autistic person I know who is successful has found a way to parlay their strengths and their abilities into something that society values. And usually that usually means some sort of employment. And when we look at some wildly successful people, Bill Gates, for example, who recently disclosed that he is autistic. He dropped out of college because so often for autistic people, for people who are otherwise neurodivergent, schooling doesn't work. It's a standardized type of education. It doesn't work well. So I think Bill Gates did okay for a college dropout. And we see that in many other situations, not just with autism, but with other neurodivergencies. So the Rebbe understood the potential of people with disabilities. Let's hear what he has to say.
The rabbi referred to the children for their problems of development, some of them Down syndrome children. And I must say, they believe that people with genetic disorders, chromosomal disorders, can be turned into high functioning and very close to study, to Yiddishkeit, etc. I read very much from the rabbi. It was a daring thing, because at this time, people didn't believe it.
And so, well, the terminology might be outdated. High functioning, we don't use that anymore. We focus more on the supports the individual needs. Someone needing some more supports or fewer supports, but the idea is there. And that by focusing on the abilities, by asking what the person can do, we can lead the way to success. And we've got one more, which describes an interesting interaction that the Rebbe had with an autistic child.
So I remember coming to his office, and the Rebbe motioned for me to sit her down on a chair. The Rebbe let me voice my concerns, what was going on. And then he took out of his desk a sheet of paper and a pencil and pushed it across the desk towards Lottie. And she automatically, without giving it any second thought, picked up the pencil and started scribbling on the paper. And the Rebbe had this big, broad smile on his face. He was absolutely delighted. And he said, "Ich weiß nicht, was mir macht der ganze Meister da." Gave me some suggestions what to do. One of them was to place her in a regular kindergarten or nursery school in the...
Inclusion before inclusion became a word. And we can take inclusion to the next level. And that next level is belonging. So we have Mark here, who's openly autistic. He's included with us. The question is, does he belong? Does he have a sense of belonging with us? And based on what I know of what Mark has told me and the people I've met in this shul, he does have a sense of belonging in this very shul. To which I credit all of you who accept Mark for who he is, focus on his strengths, and especially Rabbi Vigler over here, who leads the shul and creates a sense of openness and belonging and what is characteristic of Chabad, acceptance for who you are. And that's a big step. You know, we first become aware of somebody's differences. And once we become aware of them, we can turn from trying to make that different person more like a non-different person, which the best you can get is a poor imitation of you might say, a typical person, to becoming to accepting those differences and working with those differences. So as Rabbi Vigler mentioned before, these lights. Being under these lights is probably like looking into a spotlight for most of you. That's a difference. Well, I can work with this difference. I accept this difference in myself. And now that I accept it, I can work with it, and I realize that I can just, here's the accommodation. And you said it, non-verbally right there. This does it, and everything's fine. So that's an example of working with. That's the acceptance piece. So let's take a look at what can happen when we work with. And for example, we've got Chaim. And we've got Chaim in any shul, it could be any house of worship. We're going through the service, and sometimes it's hard for people to keep track of where they are, so there's often someone who calls out the numbers. Well, here we have someone where ritual, habits, routine are so important. And that person, it's very important for them to know where everything is, and they want to let everybody else know too. So maybe it goes a little bit too far. And we have the person who's yelling out the page numbers every time the page is turned. Well, that's a little bit too much. So then we need to communicate with this person. You know, we really appreciate you helping keep us on track. And it'll be much better for you if, and then we can designate particular pages. Maybe at the beginning of the Ashrei. Maybe where Shakaris begins in the morning, whatever it might be. In those key page numbers, that person helps us keep track, probably better than anybody else. It involves their strengths, it uses their strengths, and it creates a sense of belonging for that individual. Because we know people on the spectrum who talk, we tend to be detailed, factual, data-driven, truthful, and repetitive. It all works. We have a lot of repetition in our services. And that's why so many autistic people tend to be attracted to religion, to Judaism. And what I find at Adelphi University as faculty advisor for the Chabad on campus there is that we have a much higher rate of autistic people involved in the Chabad on campus than we find in the general population of the campus. So maybe the the number of autistic people on campus is 1%. There's a lot more than 1% of the students who are involved who are autistic. Again, we create a welcoming and a sense of belonging for this environment. So when we're with predictable and with understanding people, and that's another example of using a strength-based approach, flipping things over. When I hear social interaction and autism, the next words that come out tend to be limited and predictable. So why do we have to put limitations? Why don't we just say what it is? A predictable environment and with people who understand. And in that way, people who hear these words can follow their direction. Let's make sure things are predictable. Let's find people who understand the individual. And what we find is that this person, if they're fascinated with these page numbers, they're all going to be memorized. Maybe they'll memorize the entire service. And because this person is autistic, he keeps the shul congregants on track better than anybody else. And then we have Hannah. Now, Hannah she'd be considered as autism at level 2. So autism level 1, this is where we have autistic individuals who speak pretty well. We have Mark, we have myself, we've got you over here.
Yes, sir.
And what's your name again?
Hunter.
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 Pleasure to meet you, Hunter.
Yes, sir, Hunter. Yes, sir, Stephen.
And so, we can talk, we can get around. And some of us are employed, doing jobs like I am as a professor. You want to find undiagnosed autistic people? Check out your professors at your university and check out the rabbinate. Check out your rabbis. And so, but this individual, she needs more support. She doesn't speak much. She speaks only very few words. And she points at pictures to communicate. Picture exchange communication system. And she too enjoys being with people who understand her when interactions are predictable. And so in the basement, there's all kinds of games and activities that go on during the service. And the games and activities are related to what is happening at the service. And that way the children can learn engaging in these games, in these activities. Well, eventually it's time to go home, and the teacher sings the cleanup song, clean up, everybody, everywhere, clean up.
Clean up, everybody, do your share.
Yes, that one.
Come on.
And because it's important for her that everything has its place and everything in its place, she's the best cleanup person. She's in second to none when it comes to cleanup. So as we continue, there's an acronym that I like to use as I think about interacting with and teaching autistic and otherwise neurodivergent individuals. And this does not mean special weapons and tactics, but it's special ways and techniques. Special ways and techniques for supporting autistic and otherwise neurodivergent individuals. And there's some important concepts to consider, such as what is the difference between a modification and an accommodation in their appropriate usage. So let's take an example. When I was studying for my bar mitzvah, the traditional way didn't work. My parents sent me to Hebrew school. That didn't work. My parents got me a tutor, one-on-one, learn Hebrew. That didn't work. We got another tutor. Well, that didn't work. My parents knew that music was important to me. I was good at music. They got a cantor to record everything. The prayers before you read the Torah reading. And my reading was the first 3 days. Bereshit bara Elohim, Eitz Hashemayim, and so on. And I still remember that. I learned it as a song. And that was, you might say, a modification. And I got through the whole service. I think of other people. I think of my brother, who's 2 years older than I am. And we needed to have a bar mitzvah for him too. And a bar mitzvah is something that occurs anyways. That is something that was decided by Hashem when you're 13 years old. As a man, it just happens. It's in our relatively recent history that we've made a big celebration and a party of it. And we know the routine that goes through that one needs to do, such as the reading of the Torah, the half-Torah, and so on. But what about the individual who is unable to do that? And my brother, who was diagnosed with mild to moderate retardation, he did not have that capacity to do it. He had the capacity to understand what the ceremony was about. He certainly could walk up to the bima, just as I could walk up to the bima. But there was no way that we knew that could allow him to do what I did, to go through the whole routine. So that is a modification. We make a change to the whole thing. We make an adjustment. And we say, we help the person do as much as they can, and whatever that is. And I've heard of situations where someone who had cognitive challenges, but also mobility challenges, to the point where it was a great struggle for them to get from, say, here, up only 2 steps to here. And that is how they commemorated their bar mitzvah. And that was meaningful to them. So it's important to know when and how to make these modifications so the person feels a sense of belonging. And in doing so, by employing their strengths, by employing their abilities. So I have a musical ability. My parents found a way to use it. My brother, he didn't have enough an ability at that time. He had enough ability to, you might say, do an abbreviated version of what I did. But still, the celebration was there. So that makes me think of 9 ways that adaptations occur. And these are those 9 ways. We'll take a look at some of them. You know, every modification, change, whether it's to the environment, whether it's to how we teach, whether it's to how we interact, falls under one or more of these 9 categories. So we take a look, for example, size. I'm the Sunday school teacher. And I have a quiz. At the end of the week, it's the 10 Commandments. And everybody's expected to list those 10 Commandments, to be able to write them down, and give a brief explanation as to what they mean and how we follow those commandments. Most students can do it. I've got one student who just can't seem to do so. I find out that they're neurodivergent in some way. And I realize, no, they're not going to be able to do the whole test. They can only do 5 questions. They'll get through 5. They can do that. So after a period of adjustment and transition, they do very well when I ask for only 5. They do it. And what I've done is I've created an adaptation. I've modified the curriculum. All of you are expected to do 10. I'll be happy with 5 from you. But then, start thinking about it. I wonder if on Friday you could do the 5 that you always do, but maybe on Tuesday I could get the other 5 from you. And so what I've done is I've split the test into 2 pieces, 2 parts. And in doing so, very often I'll find that a student will be able to do that. 5 plus 5 for you? 10 for everybody else. You're doing the same thing. That is an accommodation. An accommodation gives you an equal chance of success at whatever we're doing as everybody else. Well, then I start thinking about, well, I've got other students. I've got Marlene over here. Turns out she can do 6, but never more than 6. So, okay, you can do the other 4 on Tuesday as well. But maybe I should change the whole setup. And now everybody gets a test. I ask for 5 on Friday and 5 on Tuesday. And that way, my curriculum, the way I teach, includes more people. More people have a sense of belonging. No longer are the two of you kind of held aside, separate. We do these special things, and I've made this modification. And that's a question that I always ask. When a modification is made, whether it's instruction, whether it's the physical building, whatever it is, can I set it up in a way that it benefits the entire class? Does it benefit everybody? And we only need to take a look at some physical accommodations that have been made as a result of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, access ramps. How many of you prefer access ramps over stairs? And how many of you have no mobility impairments, but you still use them? That's because they're easier. Benefits everybody. Closed captioning on TV. Even what you saw there on those little videos. Closed captioning. Used to be very expensive, only for people with vision impairments. But we realized that they can be helpful to everybody. And so often these modifications, these accommodations, can do so. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. All right, we're going to do one more of these, and we'll do another experience. Let's take a look at time. How much time do you need to complete a project? Well, we'll use the 10 Commandments again. And sure, take all the pictures you want. The stuff is meant to be used. And most of the time when we think about adjusting time, we throw more time at it. Now, I expect everybody to finish this project in 4 weeks. Mark, I know it's going to take you a little bit longer. So you've got 8 weeks. And often it works, but not always. Sometimes what a person needs is instruction on how to manage the time. So I set up a nice little timeline for Mark. By the end of the first week, you should have this done. By the end of the second, and so on. And that will get you through it. And when he gets this timeline, you get it done in 4 weeks because you needed help with the management of time. Well, shouldn't everybody get that? Yeah, everybody should get that. So that's just an extension, in this case, of good teaching practice. So here we go. We just got through Shavuos. Students are engaged in a class project where each child chooses one commandment, followed by a brief example plus a relevant picture. So you're a conscious teacher, a conscious educator, conscientious. You detail how to start with the writing from the chosen commandment, so you choose what that commandment is. It's up to you, any one of them. On a big piece of paper, then you write out an example and you find a related picture from a magazine or a newspaper, or it can be done electronically too. The whole thing can be done on the computer. So most students do fine. We have Michael over here who exceeds expectations. He does 3 commandments instead of just 1. But there's always just a few who don't seem to grasp the project. It takes him longer, all right. So, that being said, there's just 1 or 2 that don't seem to grasp it, can't get started, can't complete it. You want to help Saeed and other students. Is there a way to rework instructions on how to accommodate Saeed and also benefit everybody else? So the first one I gave, let's set up a nice timeline for Saeed, or Mordechai in this case. But let's give it to everybody. But we can take it a step further. We can be creative. And what we can do is we can set up a bulletin board, just like this. Choose one, write it out, or print it out, whatever it might be. Put your name on it, hand it to me, and I'll put it up in the right place. And so maybe we have 15 of these in a long column. And everybody can, one, get a quick view of where they are in the process. Two, students like seeing their work on the board. It's a sense of pride. Three, when the rabbi comes in to inspect the classroom, he gets very happy seeing all these pictures and the use of the bulletin board and so on. And four, when parents come in for parent-teacher conference, they like seeing the children's work on the board. But then we get to Marlene over here. Because I know Marlene has the greatest challenge in managing a sense of time. So Marlene, how would you like to be the bulletin board monitor? I've got a job for you. Students like to do jobs. And your job is to take my printouts and you put them in the right column. So now I'm using the tactile sense, the kinesthetic sense, and putting it up in the right place. But Marlene is still sometimes making mistakes. And the commandment is somehow ending up in the picture area, the picture is ending up somewhere else. Mark, how do you like to work with Marlene as a team to get those pictures up in the right place? So now I have students working together. And these are some of the things that I think about in terms of supporting individuals with differences in education, in the community. And let's do one more experience. Phonemes. Phonemes are the smallest unit of sound that we have in a language. In English, we have 44 of them. Some languages have more, some languages have less. Some languages have phonemes that we don't have, and vice versa. Some languages have phonemes, or we have phonemes that they don't have. And when there's a mismatch in phonemes, that's when you get accents. However, some people have difficulty reading phonemes. And imagine how this might translate to when learning to read Hebrew, which I could never really do. I mean, I've got the alphabet down, I can sort of sound things out, but it doesn't work. So what's that like? Well, here's a phoneme translation key. So when you see a Q in the upcoming reading, you pronounce it as a D or a T. A Z is pronounced as an M. And these are some of the differences. Well, that's all hard to remember. So I put it up as a little key here. And who's going to be brave and read the first sentence?
We pagan our crib a facilier place, a pocky like yours enk zine. It contains a hundred quillion called kick work cocahees pi casine.
Okay, so you read two sentences, and you read it exactly as it sounds,
Just like a litmus test.
according to how you read it, but what does it mean? Oh, what are you talking about?
Our glib. We begin our
Good answer. But no, yes.
Let's go.
So now who will dare to decode this according to the key so that it can be read and make sense to at least us English speakers? Who wants to give it a try? Go ahead. Okay.
It is a familiar place. A body like yours.
Yeah, you're getting it.
Familiar place.
Yeah, you've got it. You're getting it. And with a lot of work, you could get through the rest of it. And this is how some people are interpreting what we call English. Meanwhile, you as the instructor, you as the non-neurodivergent individual is reading that. And you're wondering, what's wrong with that person? What's the difficulty? And that explains why these things happen. And that's another example. That is another experience of what it can be like on this side of neurodivergence. So we're reaching the end of our time here, and let us, before we get to questions, so let us talk a little bit about the concept of universal design. And here it is, and providing accommodations. Because often I hear, why are you providing Mark extra time but you don't do it for everybody else? It's not fair to give this person but not the other person.
Bless you.
And so there's a number of examples we can look at. One is, let us say, God forbid, we have Marlene over here. She turns blue and falls out of her chair. Cardiac arrest. God forbid. However, Devorah knows CPR. So she's getting ready, hunched over, ready to go, and has a double thought. Wait a minute. It's not fair just to provide CPR for you and not do it for everybody else. And if I do that, we'll be here till midnight. We'll be here till Shabbos. So I'm sorry, I can't do it. So that's ridiculous. Of course we know it's ridiculous, because we're providing for what people need. People need these accommodations. Glasses is another one. So whenever anybody starts talking to me about it's not fair that blah, 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 I might say, or if I'm teaching it to my class, I might say, well, you know, I didn't bring my bag of glasses with me today, and it's not fair that you two are wearing glasses. Rabbi Vigler has glasses. Mark has glasses. So those of you who are wearing glasses, you just have to take them off, because that's not fair. So we know that's ridiculous. And we could even take it a step further. Okay, now borrow your neighbor's glasses, and that accommodation doesn't help at all. So what we're doing is we use these accommodations, these adaptations, to equal the playing field, to give everybody an equal chance of success. And we can use a baseball analogy here, where we have three people of varying heights. We treat everybody the same. And it helps one person doesn't need a box, and one box isn't enough. Now we provide for what everybody needs. And everybody's head is at an equal height, equal chance of success, but we can take it one step further. What if we modify the fence in such a way that people have an equal chance of seeing the ball game as they are? And that is what universal design is in learning. And it's these adaptations like this that will make each one of these individuals who are varying heights have equal access to belonging, in this case, watching the game with their friends in the community. And finally, do we consider autism or other neurodivergent conditions as a series of deficits, disorder, and disability? Or is it just a different set of abilities that we need to work with? And what can we do to go through, as I talked about last year? And again, you can look it up on the website, where I talked about the 4 A's of autism: awareness of the difference, acceptance of the difference and working with it, followed by appreciation of the difference, which Mark and I often refer to as
autism advantage.
Yes, the autistic advantage. And that is the appreciation and valuing autistic people for who we are, not for who we're not. And then that 4th A action on the top, which is the work that we're all putting in to better understanding autistic individuals and others with neurodivergent conditions. And just to wrap it all up, how can you transform what is so often considered as a weakness into a strength? Everything's got to be in the exact order. Everything's got to be lined up. Guess who's really good at following structured, broken down tasks and keeping everything neat and organized and calling out the page numbers? Need for routine. That's where we get to the specific routines and rituals in shul. Hypersensitivities to sound. That is the person who chants perfectly in tune when reading from the Torah. As an adult, say on a workplace, other examples. The person who's hypersensitive to sound. I know such a person, he's an audio engineer. Routine. I've yet to find an employer who does not like it when their employee shows up on time every single day and never calls in sick. That's an autistic characteristic. Or everything neat and organized, that's the assembly line inspector, making sure that each widget is perfectly formed, positioned, and in the right color. So these are some of the ideas that I think about when it comes to including people who are autistic, who are otherwise neurodivergent. It may be in shul, it may be in the community, it may be in the workplace, it may be at home. And now is a great time for questions. First one.
First of all, Stephen, thank you so much for coming here. It's a pleasure hearing you speak. You do a great job with presentations. Now, in this day and age, I wanted to know what your take was on AI from a neurodiverse standpoint, or like autism and AI in itself.
Oh, well, we're still learning about AI. We're still learning a lot about it. And just like any tool, it could be AI, it could be a shovel, it could be a car, whatever it is. It can be used for good, or it could be used for less than good, or something bad. So it's really a matter of how it's used. And when you bring this up, there is a similarity to the way that some autistic people communicate and the way that IA communicates. And in fact, I don't know whatever happened with the case, but there was a case at my university where a student who was in the Bridges program, that's a program that supports autistic college students, and he was accused of using AI to write a paper. And I've seen other situations where an autistic person's writing so closely looks like, is so similar to what AI tends to put out, that they get blamed for cheating. I don't know where the case went, but there's more than just that one. And it's just something to be aware of. In the back.
Do you have Asperger's syndrome? Is that what you have?
I would be considered as having Asperger's syndrome. That was removed as a diagnostic criteria in 2013.
Well, they call it high functioning, right?
They don't call it that either, but what they do call it is autism level 1. Autism is divided into 3 levels. Level 1, in need of intermittent support. So support in particular situations. That's me, that's Mark, that's many other people. Level 2, needs more support most of the time. This is the person who probably has a lot of difficulty with spoken word, but is able to communicate by pointing at pictures or other means of communication. Autism level 3, this is the person who needs the most significant support, constant support. So what used to be called Asperger's syndrome, what used to be called high-functioning autism, we're all hanging out in autism spectrum. They call it disorder, I call it difference. Autism spectrum difference, ASD level 1. That was a good question. Mark has a question.
What's the biggest challenge you see for high-paid jobs for people on level 1, like yourself, like myself, as far as aspiring for that?
All right, did you say high-paying jobs? No, it's good. I just want to make sure, yeah. So you mean a job where you can support yourself nicely. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with making money by doing good and doing good in your job. And I know what Mark is, exactly what Mark is getting at. And the challenge we face is that the most highly weighted variable in career success is not knowing how to do the job. A job posting goes up. You've got hundreds of people who can do the job. But it really is, how long do you get well along with others? So it's the social piece. And I won't say autistic people are asocial or antisocial. We just socialize differently than most people. So if we can develop an understanding, both from autistic people, because at this point we're still the minority, so we have to learn how to get along in a non-autistic world. But at the same time, we need to educate the non-autistic world and how to understand and get along with autistic and otherwise neurodivergent individuals. We're beginning to see companies understand this. We first started seeing this in the large IT companies, such as SAP, Microsoft, Google, Apple, and so on. And with these, with SAP in particular, I can speak to that because a colleague and I were hired to educate a couple of dozen, at that time called Asperger's syndrome, young adults with Asperger's syndrome, now level 1, who were interested in IT employment. They knew IT. So they asked us to develop and deliver a 40-hour training program. And so we did. At the end of the program, and by the way, we talked about everything you need to find and keep a job, all that social stuff. And at the end, SAP was expecting to hire 12 of them, about half. So everybody who got through it would get a certificate of completion, and about half of them would get hired by SAP. SAP did their interview, which was very different than a standard interview. It was more about observing candidates putting together Lego robots and then talking about the job. They ended up hiring every single one. Wow. All of them. And several years later, they were all still there except one, because that one person had moved out to California. So another characteristic of autism, getting back to routines. You give us a job that we like and that we feel a sense of belonging, you'll have the most loyal employee in the world.
So let me ask you, the first time I bumped into learning a little about autism was about 15 years ago, because friends of a friend were involved in research that was trying to understand the tremendous increase in autism or identified autism in a short period of time. And they were doing all the work on trying to correlate autism to vaccines, and particularly vaccines that had mercury in it. So my first question is, whatever happened to that discussion?
All right, well, it was at that time when we saw the prevalence of autism go from being considered as a very rare psychiatric condition caused by poor parenting, with a prevalence of about 1 in 10,000. And then we saw it beginning to increase like this. It was a nice gentle slope, and then the term that's often used, it was like a hockey stick, it went like that. To where now the CDC accepts a prevalence rate of 1 in 31. That is a lot of autism. And what it means for educators, what it means for shuls, what it means for other houses of worship, is that if you don't have an autistic person in the congregation, in the younger children that you're educating, now the numbers are going to catch up with you and you're going to have one very, very soon. So how do we explain this increase? Well, we've gotten much better at recognizing autism when we see it. So when it was down here and going up slowly, that was when we were beginning to differentiate autism and other differences from mental retardation. That was the term they used. Everybody who learned slowly, we couldn't figure them out. They were mentally retarded or disturbed in some sort of way. And those who were, for lack of better terminology, higher functioning, just like Mark and myself and some others, we were considered to have what was known as minimal brain dysfunction. Doesn't explain much, but that's what it was called. As time goes on, we're getting better and better at recognizing, at differentiating between mental retardation, dyslexia, various other things, autism, and so on. So we're having a correction of diagnoses at that time. Also, the definition of autism was expanding. So back when I was diagnosed, when I was nonverbal, when I didn't speak, had meltdowns, that is what autism was. If somebody had encountered Mark or myself, many other people, we'd either be considered in school, maybe we'd be called FLKs, funny looking kids, or minimal brain dysfunction, or just a generic disturbed or something like that. As we got better, as the definition widened, we realized that autistic people, the autism spectrum was more diverse than people having meltdowns, banging their heads, smearing poop, and all kinds of things like that. So we've seen expansion. And also greater awareness with the internet, with sharing of information. So what we're seeing now at unprecedented levels, and this goes for all types of neurodivergency, and it includes the parents as well. And what I mean by that is so much information is out there, is that Mark, he's wondering what's going on here, he's looking things up. Ooh, this autism thing describes me to a T. He does an informal self-diagnosis, I think I'm autistic. Then he goes to a doctor and gets a formal diagnosis. And that wasn't happening before. Before, Mark just was weird and probably upset and mad at himself for being weird. Why can't I be like everybody else? And then we're now at a point where Mark and all of us understand that we're much better not being like everybody else. So that's where we see the increases. What about vaccines? There isn't science proving that it's vaccines. What we do know is that there is really good correlation. And the autism bomb, which struck me at 18 months when I lost functional communication, and that happens with so many people, that's when vaccines are given. So it's a good correlation. But now we need to ask, what is the causation? And that is, the science is still out on that. I know that RFK has called for more research. We've done a lot of research on it. We haven't found it. Maybe we will in the future. But what's important is not to scare people from getting vaccines. Because we're seeing various diseases that we thought we had eradicated coming back. And if you're really concerned about vaccines, and it usually focuses on the number of vaccines that are given at one time. Many more now than there was in the past. So what about considering spreading them out some? And letting the little child, toddler, not even a toddler yet, their immune system adjust to vaccines maybe 2 at a time instead of all 6 at once, or something of that nature. I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't talk too much about it, but it's something that I might consider looking at. So something to think about. Okay, and we have a question here and
I
here.
just want to follow up on that also. What do you think about the theory President Trump brought out with taking Tylenol when you're pregnant, that has an increase in autism? Do you have a theory on that or an opinion? Because he came out and made a pretty big deal about it.
Yeah, well, I know that for every child who is autistic, their mother probably took Tylenol at one point in their lives. But whether we can blame Tylenol on the cause of autism, that's a horse from a different garage. So I think it was, some sort of misspeaking or misunderstanding. He may have misunderstood something that he read. Yes, yes.
What caused you to begin to speak?
Hashem knows. But my parents did a lot of interaction, a lot of back and forth, a lot of verbalizing things that we're doing. Otherwise, now the technique is called narration. So what is your name?
Jan.
Jan. Yeah, so Jan is sitting quietly in the chair. Jan is getting up. Jan is walking to the door. Jan is writing. I'm just describing everything you're doing. And the idea is that these words will attach to the actions. And another thing to consider in terms of speaking, there's a myth that for children who are non-speaking, if we teach them PECS, picture exchange communication systems, to point to pictures, sign language, alternate means of communication, that they will get lazy and not bother to learn how to speak. But what research has shown is that if we provide an understanding of functional communication, if speech is going to come, it's going to come faster. There's also a study that I read about. I have to look it up. Maybe I'll have to use AI to look this one up. But I did hear of a study where, let's say you're all pre-verbal children. And half of you get whatever children get as they learn how to speak. This half, I teach you sign language. And these are all typical individuals, not neurodivergent, not autistic. And what they found is that this group over here who were taught what language was, the function of language, through some alternate means, started speaking faster than this group. So what does that mean? The most important thing you can do for an autistic person is to give them a reliable means of communication. If speech is going to come,
They'll have the vocabulary.
yeah, they'll have it and it will come faster. And if it doesn't, then at least you have something they have a way to communicate.
So when you use sign language with a
Mm-hmm.
when you use sign language with a small child that's 2, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months old, and you're
Yeah, use it, yeah.
you
They'll
want more?
communicate. They'll do that.
Yeah.
They will tell you they want
I
more
did that
milk.
with my children.
It
They-
gives
Yeah.
them the ability to
Do it, yeah.
communicate.
Right, so that helps them verbalize.
Right. When the neurology develops to such a point where speaking can occur, it's going to come in faster. And if it never does, at least they've got this to communicate. So there's everything to be said, and thank you for pointing over here so I don't lose your question before I get to your question.
chemicals that they put in.
Food, environment, it's the environment. And you know, what you're talking about, food is part of the environment. And what we do know is that we're seriously mucking up the environment. And that's creating all kinds of problems. Yes, immunity disorders. Is it causing autism?
Well, they're saying there's certain diets.
Oh, then there's diets, yes.
That will help promote like faster acceleration and development in regards to autism and other diets.
Well, you bring up a very good point, because what we know, and this is a co-occurring situation, is comorbid in the medical literature, but it's a terrible sounding word, co-occurring, is that there's a certain subtype of autistic people who are unable to digest foods containing gluten and casein. So we're talking about dairy and wheat products. And if you feed them these foods, the intestines are damaged in such a way, not by the food, but previously, that it just sends everything haywire. It's like they're on opiates, gives that type of effect. And so you need to restrict those foods until their digestive tract can heal. So there is something to that. Now I don't know if we can say that gluten and casein intolerance, if you don't pay attention to it, that it causes autism. But for anybody, autistic or not, if your digestive system is a wreck, it's going to make a mess out of the rest of you. So you got to fix that. And then you can access the development for the child. Rabbi Wigler.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much, Professor Shore.
You're welcome.
Always a beautiful presentation. I just want to conclude by thanking you very much for your time. Again, thank you to Mordechai for telephone tonight's event. And I'd like to point out that Ayamushka Shentov is here from our office, from our team of rabbis and rebbitzins, because this is a part of the Mishpacha program. Mishpacha, which means family, ensuring that no Jew is left behind. We're here to volunteer, we're here to reach out, to engage with our brothers and sisters in need. So if you know somebody in need, or if you want to volunteer, please speak to Chaim Shento about the opportunities out there to help people who are not as fortunate or not as capable as they could actually be. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. We're going to continue with a minor service for those that want to say Kaddish, and for everybody else, we say thank you so much for coming. Good evening.
One more time.